The Studio Series 86 Constructicons are the latest combiner team that we're delving into, and Hook and Longhaul have been the first figures from that set I've managed to get, thanks to pop culture getting an early batch. But I gotta say, after getting the chance to handle Scrapper and Bone Crusher in hand before their release, I wasn't really excited for this set. It seemed to my eye that all of the 86 Constructicons had some kind of compromise in there. Particularly Bone Crusher, I don't think that deluxe budget did him any favours. But I did have high hopes for these two, considering the Commander budget. You know, SS86 has had a pretty much flawless track record when it comes to their Commander class outings. So does this 2-pack hold up to that standard? Well, let's take a look at them and find out. And I think we'll start with Hook because he's probably the weaker of the two. Now admittedly, Hook has a little bit more leniency for compromise because of the way he has to transform for Devastator, but unfortunately that has left the proportions a little bit skewed. But the sculpt details are great. There's a lot of focused greebling around the shins and the torso which do really well to make those parts shine, while the green is a little bit softer in terms of taking to the details, but it has some really deep sculpting to make up for it. I really enjoy some parts we see, like the asymmetrical shins, that really well sculpted vented detail all across the crotch and torso, the expansions to the wheels on the shoulders, although I do wish they could have been painted, and of course that head sculpt, which is absolutely gorgeous. The only things really bringing him down, unfortunately, are the amount of kibble he has on display. You know, it does encroach on the silhouette around the torso. And also, he is all bicep. The elbows really needed to bend from where the second set of wheels were, rather than below them. But you know, all in all, I do actually think the sculpt on this guy works pretty well. I do actually think there's opportunity for a third-party company to come in and replace the entire arms because they pop off at a mushroom peg in the bicep. I don't know if that's maybe likely, but it could happen. There is a lot of very obvious shared engineering between this and the Combiner Wars figure, which a lot of people have mentioned. Hot take, I don't care, because I do honestly think that this figure works quite well visually, especially in regards to the colours. I really love the green that they've gone for here. I don't think a darker shade really works for the Constructicons. That kind of toxic waste radiation beware high-vis look is iconic, and it's counterbalanced really well by this beautiful deep purple. The only colour I don't really think works is the grey they chose. It's a little bit of a detail devouring one. But you know, all the painted details like the little spot of green on his neck, the face, the shins, it's all pulled off pretty well. Look, I can't sit here and tell you that there aren't issues with this robot mode, there very clearly are some, but I would be lying if I said they really bothered me. The look is not the problem with this figure, and neither are the accessories. He comes with this really cool looking blaster. It is quite waffled, but the shape and the details really carry it. I'm a big fan of the way this looks, and he holds it pretty well, but by far the better of his two accessories is the hook. It doesn't come into play too much on this mode unless you really want to bolt it onto his arm or something, but this is a very versatile and usable crane arm. It tilts up and down, it's telescopic, the hook can move, it's mounted on a 5mm peg so you can turn it. This will come into play a lot more when we get into his vehicle mode, but for now, yeah, this is pretty fun. But unfortunately, the posing isn't. The head is on a pretty unrestricted ball joint that has a lot of wiggle room. You can move the collar pads out of the way to get access to the shoulders going all the way up. They can only go around so far because of the backpack. There's bicep swivels, double elbows which are restricted by the wheels, nothing at the wrist or the waist, bit disappointing. The hips can go out pretty far and forward and back pretty well. There's thigh swivels, below average knees, the feet can tilt down a little bit, and there's pretty good ankle pivots. Yeah, while the posing here is by no means unusable, it is very restricted. The limitations in the elbows, both in their position on the arm and the way they clash with the wheels, particularly the very limited knees, and of course the lacking wrist and waist swivels, they just bug me a little bit. They make it very hard for him to look dynamic. I will say the lack of a waist swivel is probably the most acceptable thing here, mostly by virtue of the way that he combines. There could have been room for the joint, but that would have been hell to transform. But the wrists and knees especially, they just really rub me the wrong way. The biggest redeeming factor when it comes to this figure's posing is just how solid he is. This thing does not move unless you want him to. All of the joints have a really well lubricated feel. Despite the clashiness, he is very satisfying to move. But that's only going to get you so far when the movement feels so unrewarding. The transformation, however, kinda works because of the same merits. There isn't a whole lot going on here, but it's just really snappy and fun. You can do this thing in about 10 seconds. Everything clicks together really solidly, there isn't much of a faff sorting it out. I really like the way that the feet lock everything in together underneath, it makes them feel very, very solid. And you end up being left with a really, really good crane mode. This isn't exactly the most thrilling thing in the world, but there's a lot of things to love about it. The fact that most of the topside surfaces have all of this grating detail is lovely. All of the wheels are pinned so he rolls really nicely. Of course, the aforementioned crane is fully usable. You even get a little bit of weapon storage on the side of the crane arm. And chief above all, once this is all compressed down, you really start to feel the weight of it. The biggest point at which you feel the Commander class price in this 2-pack is in how dense everything feels. I gotta say that the vibe of the alt mode really carries Hook for me. This is definitely my preferred mode for the figure. It's just a lot more cohesive than the robot. But I can't lie to you and say that this figure alone is gonna justify 90 quid. Long Haul, on the other hand, is a lot closer to doing that. The sculpted detail and proportions on this figure are absolutely fantastic. He is a lot chunkier than he's supposed to be, but that works for the design. It's given bulkhead vibes. And in terms of how cohesive the proportions are, this is miles ahead of Hook. The length of the legs compared to the short stout body and the big chunky arms, it just works so much better. And a lot of the surface detailing on the Go lands a little bit better than it did on Hook. That felt like there was some sparse moments where they went really hard on it. This feels a lot more contained. There are some standout moments of sculpting, like the thighs, the midriff, around the headlights, but the rest of it, it's a little bit cleaner and closer to the 86 we know. I think my favourite details have to be the wheels. The ones on the calves are a little bit obnoxious with how much they protrude out, but the shoulder ones, they just add so much to the look. And of course, just like Hook, the head is pretty much flawless, right down to the big random black chunk on the back. The only issues I really have with the sculpt on this guy are of course the wheels on the calves, which I've already mentioned. I wish those could have folded down some more. The little prongs sticking out of the smokestack on the Kabimo combination point are a bit of an eyesore, and these big hollow voids behind his wrists. Usually there'd be some detail or something in there, but there isn't here and it's just a bit more distracting than usual. But none of these are really deal breakers for me. Long Haul just looks solid as a rock, and I love him for it. And the colours largely carry over from Hook in a very good way. The green is still in play here and much more prevalent. It's got kind of an overalls look going on. And while this could probably be a little bit overpowering, I think it really works. I think the sheer amount of painted accents that we see across the rest of the sky kind of make up for it. And they are all painted in very well, especially those gloss red panels on the thighs. Love those. The thing that probably ties this all together are the black arms. They give them a little bit of individuality compared to the other Constructicons, and I really appreciate it. Yeah, I find Long Haul's robot mode a lot better looking than Hook's. It probably has something to do with it doing less in the combination, but they've really managed to prioritize this mode, and I do think it's paid off. Now, accessory-wise, Long Haul just comes with this blaster. I like the two-toned look of it, accomplished by it being two components, and it looks really good in his hands. It's nice and chunky to go with him, but it's not the most impressive thing in the world. There is kind of another thing that belongs to him, but we'll get more into that later. For now though, we should probably go into his posing, which is a little bit better than Hook's actually. The head is on a really good ball joint with a lot of wiggle room. The shoulders move out pretty standardly and can go all the way around. There's a ball jointed elbow which gives you both the elbow bend and the bicep swivel, which I expected to be annoyed about, but it ends up coming into play a bit more during the conversion. There's nothing at the wrists or the waist once again. The hips move out pretty standardly but can go forward and back pretty well. There's thigh swivels. You have to untab the knees to get access to them, but they are decent. And you have solid ankle pivots. While there aren't necessarily more joints here than there were on Hook, I think they all work a lot better for the figure. The head and arms feel a lot less restricted without all the kibble in the way. The knee bends, while still limited, look a little bit better when curved, and also you can untab the transformation joint in the thighs to extend them further. And overall, despite how chunky he is, this is just a way more dynamic sculpt. I think it's the more defined difference between the waist and chest. It does wonders for the looks of a lot of poses. It even feels really good. Not quite as good as Hook, I will say, but good nonetheless. But overall, in the robot mode, this is an absolute slam dunk over Hook's. But how does it go in the transformation? Well, it has the same feel, it's still very simple and fun, but I don't really get the same satisfied feeling that I do with the other figure in this box. I don't know, I think this is just a little too easy. It does reveal some cool hidden engine detail under the chest though, that's nice. And I can't really disagree with this dump truck mode, this thing is adorable. The front half of course retains a lot of the details from Long Haul's chest and they work really well in the alt mode. The wheels still look fantastic, and the legs make a really convincing, if shallow, dump bed. I do wish you could have used it without moving the wheels out of the way though. Much like Hook, all the wheels are pinned so he rolls really smoothly. There's a port on the side for the blaster. It's not the most full-featured dump truck in the world, but it's just fun and satisfying to hold and frankly adorable. And if you want to, you can ruin it with this nonsensical trailer piece. In order to keep Long Haul's robot mode fairly consistent and not have him have gigantic legs for Devastator like the Combiner Wars version, they've opted to have a very big parts forming piece make up the crotch of Devastator, which I do understand, I am behind this 100%, but I just wish it could have had better integration into the other modes. I suppose this trailer is a fine addition. The wheels match up fairly well, the sculpting works with Long Haul, but when's the last time you saw a dump truck towing a trailer? All things considered, the functionality of this piece is pretty good. It houses all of the extra components of Devastator, the hands, the chest plate, and of course the crotch. But my main complaint is that when they did this for Menasor, they gave it a base mode for the robot mode that I'll never use, but they still did it. Same with Superion. This just stays a little box that you sit off to the side. but the actual way that it works into the Devastator combination, I am not annoyed about. Getting Hook prepared for the combine mode is pretty simple, although I do suggest you untab the Devastator head rather than trying to brute force it apart. But the rest of it is just tabbing it together in the right orientation and flipping out some combiner pegs. Long haul is also pretty simple. You're largely just flattening them out and turning the arms into receptacles for the combine mode arms. And then the trailer is immensely simple. You're just folding out the combiner peg and unfurling the tarp over it. I do suggest when you're transforming the legs, you try and untab the hip skirts first, then bring the legs down though. It'll save you a headache. And then when you have everything complete, you can just slot it all together, plug on the extra accessories, and there you go. Devastator's torso, looking fan-f***ing-tastic. I'm immensely excited to have this combine mode complete because it is absolutely enormous in hand. Granted, he does have a pretty significant backpack and a butt flap. That is annoying. It is relatively animation accurate, but annoying nonetheless. However, when you have it in hand, you can really look past it. I won't go into too much detail about this here until we have the entire thing in hand, but this just looks really, really good. The parts forming seems well justified in my eyes to have a very proportionate torso, and we've even got some really good joints in here, like the head swivel, waist swivel, hips moving out on a really tight joint, and forward and back on a really good ratchet, and the knees on a tight ratchet. This thing has some serious promise. And overall, this is probably the thing that's worth judging it on. Because unfortunately, the individual bots, while I really like long haul, they aren't going to justify £90. They have some serious heft to them, they have a really great build quality, but they don't do enough as individual figures to justify that price. But when put together in the combine mode, this is as big and heavy as Armada Optimus in his super mode. If you have any plans on going in on Devastator, this is 100% worth it, but if you just want it for a long haul and a hook, I'm not sure these are going to be the best spend. But just hear me out when I say that despite that backpack, this combine mode is going to be an absolute killer. And if you're just as excited to see the full set in action as I am, leave a like. If you disagree with anything I've said in this video, then please stick your thoughts down in the comments. And be sure to subscribe for the next one. And we'll see how this year's other combiner stacks up. And if you're feeling a little impatient, then you can always check out my Patreon. For less than $3, you get early access, your name in the credits, access to photo galleries, the whole lot. It's always an option. Right now though, I watched The Conjuring for the first time the other day and it's really got me in the mood for some Phasmophobia, so I'm gonna go play that. Yeah, that sounds like a plan. Ciao!